No, it's fine. Okay, hello everyone. I sent Mare Mekomot, was not printed, so I need to make up a shiur today. So I don't know. What do you want to talk about? You know what? But maybe I'll just talk about
current events.
Yeah. No, but I think I'll speak about something that obviously relates to the Parsha, and also probably relates to. Yeah, why not? Okay, and relates to many halachic questions that sometimes I'm being asked, or I'm sure you ask yourself. So one of the commandments in our Parsha, we have definitely many commandments, and one of the what?
What would you do today if you were the Prime Minister? What? Oh. You can't deal with that.
It's a trick question.
So I'll talk about this commandment, and then we can definitely elaborate on it a bit, and to try to understand maybe some halachic ramifications to it. So one of the mitzvot in our parsha is Lifnei Iver lo titen mirshol. Okay, you should not put an obstacle in front of a blind person, which basically it was done to me when I don't have Mare Mekomot, so I need to make up a new shiur. So obviously, when you look at this pasuk, so you ask yourself, what does it mean? Obviously, there is a simple understanding, which is what you see a blind person, don't put your feet, and then he falls. So that's obviously. But the Gemara in Avodah Zarah talks about something very different, and it's not only the Gemara; it's the Midrashim as well. That talks really about the idea of what? Of not failing your friend. And what does it mean, not failing your friend? Which means don't give a bad advice. If you see someone who needs an advice, don't give a bad advice to someone. Don't be quiet when you hear someone conspiring against your friend, and all sorts of other things. But the Gemara in Avodah Zarah somewhere, I think in the Vav. In the Vav. The Gemara in the Vav, in Avodah Zarah in the Vav, has a very interesting discussion about Lifnei Iver lo titen mirshol. And you know what? Maybe I'll just throw two. We'll start with two examples. I'll just get the teaser, so you get into just one second. A teaser, and I'll get you two questions that are very common. And then from there we will start. So, for example, you have a non-religious worker in your house. Can you offer him or her food or drink, knowing that he or she are not going to what? To recite a bracha. Okay? Now, no, not religious, not Jewish, not religious. Knowing, not Jewish. If you ask, if it's kosher or not, then you need to obviously be alarmed. But non-religious Jew who comes to your house to fix something, he's there for a few hours, and even if he's not there for a few hours, even if the first minute they ask for coffee. So so the idea is, can you serve him or her something knowing that they are not going to recite a bracha? A. B. You are working in a restaurant, and this restaurant is not kosher. Can you work in a non-kosher restaurant knowing that what? That you are serving non-kosher food to Jews, even though they are not religious, but for Jews. A. So that's the second question. The third question: can you keep your butcher shop open during the Shavua Shechal Bo Tisha B'Av, or the 9 days, knowing that non-religious Jews will buy meat during the 9 days of Shavua Shechal Bo Tisha B'Av, and all of that? So obviously you understand the questions are what? The questions are what? The questions are, can you facilitate something that is an isur, it's a prohibition for someone, and not knowing for sure that he or she are coming, or even if you know for sure. So those are just common modern questions, and let's see how it starts with the Gemara, and then later on we'll try to deal with those questions. Okay, so the Gemara in Avodah Zarah in Vav Amud Aleph says the following. Ibaya leu Mishum arvacha or dilma mishum lifnei iver lo titen mirshol. What do I mean by that? So the Mishnah in Avodah Zarah, the first Mishnah in Avodah Zarah says that 3 days before a non-Jewish holiday, you shouldn't do any business with them. and 3 days after their holiday also, there is a problem. But let's say 3 yamim lifnei, then 3 days before their non-Jewish holiday, you shouldn't do any business with them. You obviously, by the way, understand the stress on the Jewish community. Yeah, if you take into consideration all the Jewish holidays, and Shabbat, and Chol HaMoed, and the non-Jewish holidays, so the question is obviously, when do you have time to do any business, right? But whatever, that was in the time of the pagans, whatever it is, the 3 days before their non-Jewish holiday, so you can't do any business with them. But the question is obviously why? Why not? So the Gemara says, is that because of what? Of harvacha, which means because you are making business with them and they make some money, they will go and what? And praise their God. So you are in a way helping them to praise their God. Or Mishum Lifnei Iver lo titen michshol. Because when you sell them, for example, an animal, they will take that animal and they will sacrifice it. So you are basically the one that empower them and allow them or enable them to what? To bring that sacrifice. Everyone is with me with the question? Very simple question. So the Gemara says, Lemay nafka mina. Who cares? But who cares? Is that because they are praising their God because of the business that they did, or because you enable them to have an animal to bring to their idol? So the answer the Gemara gives is what? The itle be'ema achariti. That this non-Jew has another animal. He doesn't need necessarily your animal. He has another animal to bring as a sacrifice. So the Gemara says, I amart mishum arvacha hakamar vachle. And if you are telling me that it's because that he makes some kind of a profit and therefore he will go and thank his God, that might apply even if he has another animal. Why? He has an animal that its value is $20,000. He bought an animal for you for only $7,000 and he negotiated well. So instead of sacrificing an animal that cost $20,000, he sacrificing an animal that cost only $5,000. So he made some money and so he will go and thank his God. But I amart mishum iver lo titen michshol, ha'it ledide. So if he has an animal and you sold him an animal because there is no benefit, because he could potentially bring his own animal and he doesn't need yours, it overrides the issue of what? Of not selling an animal 3 days before their holiday because you are afraid that they're going to want to sacrifice it, which means Lifnei Iver lo titen michshol, that you shouldn't put an obstacle in front of a blind person, does not apply if I can get it by myself. Meaning, if I can get it by myself, even though you are giving it to me, there is no problem. So then the Gemara says, V'chi itle lo avar mishum iver lo titen michshol? I don't understand. Why? The simple understanding is that you should not enable someone to do what? To violate a commandment. I don't care if he has an animal or not. Right? But the minute that I sold him an animal, I basically what? Enabled him to take this animal and to sacrifice it. So the Gemara says, V'atani amar Rabbi Natan, minayin shelo yoshit adam kos shel yain lenazir, ve'ever min achai livnei noach, Talmud lomar, Lifnei Iver lo titen michshol. והאחא דכי לא יאיב ענן שקלה היו, וכעבר משום עיוור לא תיתן מכשול. So now the Gemara is asking a question. There is a braita. What is a braita?
Addition.
Not so much addition. Bara. What is bara? Outside. Even in Arabic today, bara is outside. Braita is same status of a Mishnah, but it was not included in the codification of Rabbi. But it was outside. Why? Some of it because they had some mistakes, some issues, whatever. So that's called braita. Susie, you talked about Tosefta. Okay, the Tosefta is also a Tanaic source. Also was not included in the Mishnayot. According to some, maybe it was composed a bit later. Some say composed earlier. Whatever it is, the idea is that's Tosefta. Now braita is bara, is outside. Okay. In that braita, it says what? That you shouldn't, if someone is a Nazir. So obviously one of the prohibitions of Nazir is to do what? What he cannot do? He cannot drink wine. You cannot go to the Nazir and say L'chaim and give him a glass in a wedding or in a bar. Even though the Nazir sits in the bar and he can definitely get his own, you cannot hand it to him. Okay? Or you are not allowed to hand ever minachai. What is ever minachai? a limb from an animal, from a living animal. That's one of the things, and one of the dinim that the non-Jew is also obligated in. That's one of the 7 mitzvot bnei Noach. So you are not allowed to give it to them, even though they seems to be can get it by themselves. So the Gemara says, "Acha b'may askinan dekai bitrei evrei nahara. Daikanami diktani lo yoshit veloktani lo iten shma mina." So the Gemara says there is a major distinction between ever nahar echad veshnei evrei nahar. What does that mean? It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for what? It's a metaphor for the following concept. Trei evrei nahar, 2 banks to the river.
2 what?
Banks, like 2 sides to the river. I know it sounds almost like a Palestinian chant, right? So the idea is that if it's in the 2 sides of the river, which means I cannot easily get it, when you give it to me, even though potentially I can get it, you, by giving it to me, you made it easier for me, and therefore you are violating Lifnei Iver lo titen michshol. If it's in one side of the river, which means it's accessible, I can get it without you, so then there is no problem. No. You are not violating Lifnei Iver lo titen michshol. Okay. So if I would ask you, okay, so what are the measures, so how do I define Lifnei Iver lo titen michshol? When do you violate it? You violate it only if I cannot get it by myself. If I can get it by myself, you don't violate it. Now,
How do you know?
okay, so first is how do you know? So that can be very easy. If if I'm walking in a non-kosher restaurant and on that street you have 10 other non-kosher restaurants, and you're just walking on the street, and I'm here and the second restaurant is there, and he wants to buy a non-kosher food, he can get it in my place, he can get it in someone else's place, right? If you are the only restaurant in town, okay, and the other restaurant is 2,000 miles away, so then it makes sense. However, especially in today's world, I can get things online, right? So the only matter is a matter of time, not accessibility. I can get whatever I want, just will take a little bit more time and maybe a little bit more money. So it might change the idea of Trei Evrei Nahar and Ever Nahar Echad. Back then in ancient times, yes, when it's on the other side of the river or the other side of the world, it will be very hard for me to get it. Today's world is obviously much easier. Okay, so you remember all the halachic questions we asked before? Okay, but before we get there, let me share with you an interesting Tosfot. Let me just recollect my memories. Yeah, okay. The Braita says, and I'm sorry, it's all by heart for you. So but you are with me? Do you need me to repeat anything? I try to remember something that it's not that complicated. It can be complicated. I'll try to make it as simple as I can. The Braita says what? The Braita says that, how do we know that you shouldn't hand a glass of wine to a Nazir? Because it says, Lifnei Iver lo titen michshol. It says Tosfot. Do we know anything about that's not the Tosefta. This is Tosfot. Do you need a little bit of an introduction for Tosfot? It will be interesting, I think. You know what? Let me give you a little introduction. Why not?
Italy, 16th century.
That's the Sforno, Susie.
Really?
Today, that's the Sforno, but you are correct about the Sforno, 16th century. So who are the Tosfot? So we mentioned many times Tosfot. I'm sure you hear in many shiurim you hear about the Tosfot. Who is the Tosfot? Tosfot is not a person. Tosfot is 200 years of Talmudic literature. Okay, that's Tosfot. Ba'alei HaTosfot. Okay, so those are what they call the authors of the Tosfot. Now, when you say Tosfot, Tosefet comes as a word of Tosefet. Tosefet is what? An additional thing for something. What is that something? So that's interesting. There is a very interesting discussion among the Chokrim. What exactly was the goal and the methods of Tosfot? And when did it start? Okay? So, let me take you a little bit to ancient times. Okay? So put the Lifnei Iver lo titen michshol aside for a second. don't put an obstacle in front of a blind person. Put it aside in your mind for a second. Let's talk a little bit about the Balei Atos. I think it's important. So we know that we had the time of the Mishnah, the time of the Talmud, the Amoraim. The time of the Mishnah ended around the end of the 2nd century. Then we have Amoraim, and that ended around probably 5th to 6th century. Then we have what we call Stama de Gemara, the discussions that were in the Beit Midrash. And then around the 7th century, we have Svorim, and then we have what we call Geonim. They were really brilliant. Not like today, everyone is brilliant. They were brilliant. And also why they were called Geonim, by the way. Gaon is only one person. He's Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Geon Yaakov in Bavel. There were 2 yeshivot in Bavel. One in Pumbedita and one in Sura on Ardia. There were sometimes 3, but those are the 2 main ones. And the yeshiva is called Geon Yaakov, and that's why it's called Gaon. Okay, Gaon, by the way, is also pride. Geon Yaakov. Okay, so that's why it's interesting, because Dafka beBavel they called it Geon Yaakov, like the Jewish pride is where in Bavel instead of Eretz Israel. Well, whatever. We're not going to go into the politics. So then he was called Gaon, and then the Geonim came to an end around the last Gaon is Rav Hai Gaon. He died at 1038, which was like the first third of the 11th century. And after that, basically, the Gaonim went down. Rav Hai Gaon was basically the last Gaon that we will consider as a Gaon. And then we have I will call it some kind of a black hole. Because the time of the Geonim is gone. Then we have some rabbis that we know, from example, from Kirwan, which is Tzfon Africa, South Africa. Rabbeinu Hananel, he is from Kirwan. How exactly he got there, I'll invite you to a different shiur that I will give. There is a Maaseh, which we are not sure if it's true or not, Maaseh be'arba'a shvuim. It's a Maaseh about 4 prisoners. And one of those prisoners was his father. They were captured by pirates on their way from Italy, probably to collect money. And then they hid their identity because they were like really scholars. And then the Jews in North Africa, in Kirwan, they ransomed him, the father, Rabbeinu Metushiel, and he opened up a yeshiva in Kirwan. And his son, Rabbeinu Hananel, he was probably the first one to write a perush, a commentary on the Talmud. Here you have it. You can't see it, it's okay. But that's Rabbeinu Hananel. He was probably the first one to do a comprehensive work on the Talmud. Like to try to understand the Talmud. What was before? Before, who learned the Talmud? Think about it. Who studied the Talmud in the time of the Geonim? Only smart people. Which were the Geonim? Their students. What do you think was the number? 400 at the height of the season. And also, there was a lot of politics, and who is invited and who is not, but most people didn't do it. Jews were simple Jews, whatever they had a Shaila, they sent it to the Geonim everywhere. By the way, the Geonim sat where? In Iraq. Okay? And basically, most Jews were under Islamic control. There were only minority of Jews were under Christian rule. Okay? Little bit were in Sicily, if I'm not mistaken. In England, Jews already came in 1066, but that's really at the end of Tkufat HaGeonim. Most Jews live where? In Israel, in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran, in all of those places, okay? Even in Spain, there was under Muslim control, whatever it's called. So, you send a question to the Geonim, and they will answer only twice a year. Before Rosh Hashanah, Chodesh Elul, and before Pesach. So, I don't know, if you have a problem with the chicken in Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, I don't know if you want to wait for an answer by Chodesh Nisan. It might be a dead issue, but it is what it is. That's the way they will answer, and only the Gaon can answer questions. meaning there is a study in the Beit Midrash, and only the Gaon is one to answer, and you need to send money with the letter. It's fascinating. Tqufat HaGeonim is fascinating. We're not going to go there now, but let's leave that aside. So then we have Rabbeinu Hananel. Okay, so he is there. Very good. Then we have, obviously, the well-known Parshan, Rashi. Rab Shlomo Yitzchaki in France, was born when? 1040, died at 1105. Okay? So this is Rashi, and he writes commentary on Chumash, Tanakh, Psakim. I mean, brilliant. Where did he get his education from? Germany. He quotes a lot Rabbeinu Gershom Meor HaGolah, but he never studied by him, because Rabbeinu Gershom Meor HaGolah died when? 1028. And we said that Rashi was born at 1040. So he definitely didn't see him, but he did have mesorot from him, traditions from him, from his time in Germany. Who were Rashi's rabbis? So he mentions to Rabbi Yaakov Bar Yakar, and I forgot someone else, and Rabbeinu Yitzchak, who was his father. And there was one more. Now, who is Rabbeinu Gershom Meor HaGolah? Where did he come from? How come that in Germany they had a center of Jewish studies? Don't know. No one knows.
Who was the rabbi?
Gershom Meor HaGolah. We know Rabbeinu Gershom Meor HaGolah from all his takanot, all his decrees, not to have two wives, not to open up mail, that it's not yours. That's Rabbeinu Gershom Meor HaGolah. Okay? Now, Meor HaGolah is the luminary of the exile. But where did he come from? We don't know anything about him. We know little about him. Professor Chaim Soloveitchik wanted to say something that everyone who has any courage says that he's not right, but you need to be very careful saying to Professor Chaim Soloveitchik that he is not correct. He has some interesting proofs, but most people do not accept his idea that he thinks that there was another yeshiva in Germany at the same time that there were yeshivot in the time of the Geonim. לא יודע. יכול להיות שכן, יכול להיות שלא. He has some proofs, not all of them are convincing, whatever it is. בסדר. So Rashi in France, so he takes what he learned in Germany and he goes to France, and then he has 3 daughters. His 3 daughters are marrying 3 Talmidei Chachamim. The Rivan, the Rabbi Meir, Rashbam was a grandson. There is one is Rabbi Meir, the other one is I think Rivan, and the other one I forgot the name. So therefore, all of them become now they are taking what Rashi did, and they start developing it. But mostly it's commenting on Rashi. That's the beginning. However, then you have the grandchildren, and the grandchildren are the ones to develop the method. The most famous one is obviously Rabbeinu Tam. What was his real name? Yaakov. Why is called Tam? Yaakov Ish Tam. His name, when in the Brit, his name was not Tam. His nickname was not Tamimi. He was Yaakov. Yaakov, but because Yaakov Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim, so the nickname became Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam, who lived in the 12th century, beginning of the 12th century, so he developed this shita, this attitude of Tosfot, and we call it, and I'll say it in Hebrew, it's the same thing like in English, dialectica. In English, dialectica. What does it mean, dialectica? Dialectics. So what does that mean? You take one source here, you go one source there, and you compare them, and you see the differences, and then you do one of 2 things, right? One of 3 things. You reject one, and you accept only one, or you create a situation that you say, okay, this thing applies only when the situation is A, and this one is only when the situation is B. Or you harmonize it. Now, Rabbeinu Tam, who was a brilliant person, very assertive, knew exactly who he was, and was a little
Confident, overconfident.
Might be. He never suffered from a low self-esteem. Okay, he never suffered from low self-esteem. the Tam was not because of tmimut, not because being naive, but just because of sitting in a Bet Midrash.
Confident and proud.
Yeah, so Rabbeinu Tam start creating this method, and why he created that method, that's an interesting thing. Some people say that it was a little bit of an influence of what was going on in France at that time. The first university opened up in Paris at the beginning of the 12th century, and the dialectica was something that was definitely something that most of the scholars in France dealt with. Now, to tell you that Rabbeinu Tam went to the university to learn it, or that he had any conversations with non-Jewish scholars, I have no idea. No idea, but it's definitely in the air. However, he created it, and then there is somewhat of a deviation. When you start looking at Tosfot, especially from Rabbeinu Tam's time, you see that there is a change. Yes, they definitely mention Rashi many times. Sometimes they call him Rashi, and sometimes they call him the Kuntras. What is Kuntras?
Contrast.
Machberet, booklet. Rashi wrote his commentary on what? On Machbarot, on paper, on parchment. And basically you have a pile of pages, and that's called Kuntras. And they will probably tie it with some kind of a leather, okay, and a string of leather, and that's called Kuntras. Okay. Now, so Rabbeinu Tam start basically, and that's how in the 13th century, how they viewed what he did in the 12th century. They said that Rabbeinu Tam, and many of the Balei HaTosfot after him, basically viewed the world, the Talmud, as a kadur. What is a kadur? A ball. Which means it's like a circle. Which means everything needs to fit. Which means you need to harmonize all the sources together. And if you read Tosfot, and not only read, but you study Tosfot, you see that sometimes Tosfot asks questions that if I will not tell you that this is Tosfot, you would think this is one of the Amoraim in the Talmud. Many times the Tosfot will ask why the Talmud didn't ask A, he couldn't say B. So Tosfot become, from a commentary on Rashi, become what? A continuation for the Talmud. And as such, they start also making psakim, halachic decisions for the time. I mean, Masechet Avodah Zarah is a prime example of, it says something in the Mishnah, it says something in the Talmud, and the Tosfot already in the beginning of 12th century basically saying that most of it does not apply anymore today. If you read Masechet Avodah Zarah Perek Rishon, most of it you can totally ignore according to the halacha. For example, as I said before, 3 days before their holiday you cannot do any business with them, right? Can you show me any Jewish community that can survive not doing businesses 3 days before a non-Jewish holiday? Who is going to sell them their Christmas decoration? If not us. No. Sukkah decoration, right? No. Who is going to renovate their churches? I'm not being funny. Look at the shutim. Look at the responsa from the 11th, 12th, and 13th century. Most of the businesses the Jews did because of the restrictions, which was money, loans, and interest. It was only with whom? With Christians. So Rabbeinu Tam had to deal with those issues and basically says, today the Christians are not pagans and you can do that. Everything the Mishnah says talk only about pagans. Okay, who told you? Rabbeinu Tam told me. So there are many, many interesting things that you can see by Tosfot, but I just want to talk about the method. So Rabbeinu Tam was the first one. He had many students, many. It's not a yeshivat Ponovich, okay? We're talking about dozens of students, but his students came from everywhere. Russia, Bohemia, England, obviously France, Germany, Hungary. Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam had all those students. So as you see, it's not about the numbers, it's about the kind of students you have. And they basically start spreading his Torah and his understanding. Now, as I said before, he was very assertive. I mean, he even went against what the Beit Din in Paris had to say. He sent them letters, says, you have no idea what you're talking about, you need to come to me, I'll tell you what to do. So, whatever. That's Rabbeinu Tam. Marcy, I'll take you in a second, or you need to, because if not,
I just wanted, did he get pushback with what he was doing?
Oh, sure, but he didn't care. No, you see, I don't want to portray him like God forbid, someone is so assertive, but he
So just wrong.
He knew he's correct.
Because of his lineage?
Because of the knowledge. He would argue with his brother-in-law, with his nephew, with his older brother. Who was his older brother? The Rashbam. The Rashbam who saw Rashi. He says, with all due respect, I have a wonderful brother, but he's wrong. He's wrong and he's wrong and he's wrong. So he thought that he's presenting. By the way, Rabbeinu Tam himself almost was murdered by the Crusaders. You know, the first Crusaders was in 1096 in Germany. Then later on they came to France. And he was basically circled by some Crusaders and they beat him up. They beat him up, like, seriously. Why not? He's Jewish.
But not because of what he...
Oh, no. They knew that he's the leader of the Jews. So they beat him up. And then a knight came by and saved him. And that knight, I think, owed him some money. So that's why he saved him. But Rabbeinu Tam survived. Okay, so Rabbeinu Tam is gone. So we have his nephew by the name of Rabbeinu Yitzchak. Sometimes we call him Rabbeinu Yitzchak Dampierre, sometimes Rabbeinu Zaken. And he lived in where? In Dampierre. Any French people here? I probably butchered the word, but it's called Dampierre. Okay, I don't know how you say it in French. So Rabbeinu Yitzchak Dampierre was much more subdued than Rabbeinu Tam. He was less assertive. And he continued to develop the Tosfot, but he was not that creative like Rabbeinu Tam, but definitely he created the yeshiva and he more mainstreamed Tosfot. After that, so he is in the second half of the 12th century. By the way, just a teaser, I don't know, it's 35 days from now, 36 days from now, but my shiur for Shavuot will illustrate this contrast between Rabbeinu Tam and Ri regarding converts. I'm going to talk about converts from the time of the Talmud until the Middle Ages in France, Germany, and Spain. And you'll see, it's a very interesting attitude that they have, not exactly all the time, and you shall love the convert. Because of many different reasons, which is very interesting. There is obviously a Talmudic issue and there is obviously a halachic issue. However, this will be the shiur in Hebrew. Okay, a challenge for you. Why not? The English will be a different topic. Okay, beseder. Let's go back to us. So Ri Zaken does what he does, and then there is some kind of a netek, really, of a disconnect between Germany and France, and everyone is doing their own thing. And then you have Rabbi Shimshon Mishantz. Rabbi Shimshon from Shantz. And what he does, he basically edits and compiles the Tosfot. Meaning he takes everything that was said before and then he starts composing it. When you read the Tosfot here and where it says Amar Rabbeinu Tam, no, that was 100 years ago. Rab Shimshon Mishantz takes all those traditions and he composes it and he edits it, and that's the Tosfot you have mostly in many of the tractates on the Talmud, or it's Rab Shimshon Mishantz or Rabbi Elazar Mituch, which was also, he did basically the same thing.
When was this? The 13th?
They are the 13th century. Also what happened in the 13th century, there are other Tosfot. For example, Tosfot HaRosh, that was composed where? In Spain. The Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, was a Talmud of whom? Maharami Rothenburg. You know Maharami Rothenburg? Yeah, there's a famous story that was imprisoned, and which, by the way, also we are not exactly sure if that's the story about him or someone else. But whatever it is, he was a 13th century incredible scholar in Germany, and the Rosh was one of his students. Now, after the Maharami Rothenburg was captured on his way to Israel, by the way, he wanted to make Aliyah, the Rosh understood that it's not safe to be in Germany. Interesting. And so he fled. And he went to Spain. In Spain, the Rashba heard about his arrival, and he appointed him to be the chief rabbi. That's end of the 13th century, beginning of the 14th century, but really at the end of the 13th century. So the Rosh was able to escape to Spain, and he, in Spain, became a chief rabbi of a city, and obviously opened up a yeshiva. But for him, it was very interesting, because that's the first time known to us that an Ashkenazi posek became a Sephardi posek as well. So he was always trying to balance the two traditions. And it's interesting, in some of his tshuvot, he describes that he tried to explain to the Sephardic Jews, you are wrong. And they told him, don't tell us what to do. Bichlal, Sephardic Jews from Spain, and you can see it after the expulsion in 1492, that when they go to other communities, they don't act like guests. They act like the Balebatim. Because they came with numbers, okay? I'm not sure money, but they came with traditions. And they said that we are there since the expulsion from the Second Temple. And who are you, like Jews? You have no tradition. We have the tradition. So it's very interesting. So we have Tosfot Rosh, and we have also Rabbeinu Peretz. Tosfot Rabbeinu Peretz, and we have Tosfot Rid. Who is Rid? Rabbi Yeshaya Diterani. Take a guess, where is he from? Italy. Italy, the 13th century and 14th century, Rabbi Yeshaya Diterani, who also wrote the Tosfot. So Tosfot basically is a compilation of almost 200 years. This is how many? Good. We have no idea. What do I mean we have no idea? Let me ask you a question. Do you know the people of the Great Assembly? Like you heard about them, right? The Anshe Knesset Agdola, right? Can you name me 10 people from the Anshe Knesset Agdola? Good. Who? Okay, let's put him there. Okay. Go. We have 120. Yes.
No, sorry.
No? Good guess, but not this time. Okay, 2. Ma? Shmaya Naftalion? Probably not. No. Shimon HaTzadik was the last. Very good. So you got the last one. Very good. Okay, we have 3. What? Ma pitom. Very late. Chagai Zecharia? Probably not. Who was the first one? Me?
Antigonus.
No. Antigonus was the Talmud of Shimon HaTzadik. The Shimon HaTzadik ended that era. Okay, so he was the last one. Who was the first one? You know him. He's in Tanakh. Ezra. Nachon. Ezra was the first one. So Ezra was the first one. Shimon HaTzadik was the last one. Okay? Shimon HaTzadik died when? Be'erech 200 years, 200 BCE. Because Antigonus was around 160... No, rega. No, even before. No, ma pitom. Maybe the 3rd century BCE. Be'erech, that's where Shimon HaTzadik is. And because he was at the same time, according to our tradition, with what's his name? The Caesar that saw him. Whatever his name is. Alexander Mogdon. Thank you. So Alexander Mogdon was when? Be'erech 3rd BC. 333. Okay, thank you. So he saw Shimon HaTzadik. Antigonus Shisocho was a student of his, and Antigonus was around 2 generations before Mered HaChashmonaim. Mered HaChashmonaim was when? Around 167, if I'm not mistaken. So that's BCE. So that's what we're talking about. So Shimon HaTzadik was the last one. Ezra was the first one. So you're talking about, I don't know how many years we're talking about. They came back from exile, 70 years after exile. So around 200 years, right? So we know the first one, Ezra. We know the last one, Shimon HaTzadik. We have Mordechai based on our tradition. Do we know any others? Don't try. You will not. Maybe you will find one more name. Why don't we have their names? So part of it was, who care about my name? I care about what? What I did. And that's the same thing with the Tosfot. How many Baalei Tosfot we know? Look at the book of Orbach. Professor Orbach wrote two krachim on that. Tosfot Toldotehem Chayehem Veshitatam, or something like that. I forgot. So he mentions how many Baalei Tosfot? Maybe 50, 70. In 200 years, you understand that you have definitely more than 70. So one of the claims is that they did exactly what the Anshe Knesset Agdola did, which means, who cares about the name? I'm talking about what we did. That's A. So that's... Oh, we got to all of it from... I was about to read to you Tosfot about the Lifnei Iver lo titen michshol, but that's the idea of what? Of Tosfot. So the idea of the process of Tosfot basically came to an end be'erech at the 14th century, and after the 14th century, you have you have some problem. I mean, okay, I'll tell you a few things. There was something terrible that happened in the middle of the beginning of the 13th century in France, like almost towards the half of the century. The burning of the Talmud, exactly. 1244 or 1242, it depends. Rabbi Yechiel from Paris, he was the Rosh Yeshiva, and he had to argue with the church, and then at the end of the day, they burnt the Talmud. Can you imagine? You don't have a computer. Nothing is stored in the cloud. It's all manuscripts. So they said, according to the 20 koronot, 20 wagons filled with manuscripts were burnt. Can you imagine the loss of what? Of sources. So basically, sources. You just don't have books. So you can remember many things by heart, but you don't have books. So the idea is that in the 13th century, Tosfot, the idea of Tosfot, the attitude, the approach of Tosfot, took some kind of a turn. It's hard to innovate. It's time for what? For compilation, for editing, for putting everything that I have together and put it in documents. By the way, just as a side note, one of the tricks that non-Jews who borrowed money from Jews, one of their tricks was to do what? To burn books. Why? Because many Jews, they wrote the loans where? In the books. So when you get rid of the book, you get rid of the loan because you can't prove it. I mean, it's amazing. If you want, I can tell you stories. Not stories. I was not there, but sometimes I feel I do live in my work is working with the Middle Ages. So sometimes I feel like I live there. But the idea is that it was terrible. And just think about it. I mean, even what's happened in the end of the 13th century, you have the expulsion from England at 1290. 2,000 English Jews were expelled. So what can they take with themselves? Not too much. So they go to where? Where do you think they'll go from England? Obviously to France. That's the easiest place to go to. Most of them will go to France. They stayed there for how long? 16 years. 1306. 1306, we have an expulsion from France. How many French Jews were expelled? 100,000.
Wow. Why? What it took? They expelled them.
Anti-Semitism, loans, Christianity, hate, wanted
What's the
their...
difference between Inquisition and
Oh, Inquisition is much later.
I mean, Inquisition I know, my family experience, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, anti-Semitism anyway, everywhere in the Europe back then and now, or what event, King's Order, or what?
Oh yeah, King's Order because, there was pressure from the church, or because England already did it, or because he wanted their money. I mean, pick one.
They don't need it.
You can pick more than one if you want. There's no restrictions.
I
So
got
where
it.
did they go?
Where did they go? Okay, so some of them went to southern France. I feel like we are on a cruise, okay? So bring some memories. So the thing is what? Is that where did they go? So some of them went to southern France because the fact what we have today, France, it was not a country. There were regions. So you can have this region is controlled by this king and the other region is controlled by the other king. Whatever what we call, for example, Rabbi Menachem Ameiri, who lived in the beginning of the 14th century, he lived in Perpignan. Where is Perpignan? Provence, what we will call southern France. Back then it was not southern France. It was basically a region which was quote unquote not connected to Paris or whatever. So some of them went to southern France, and some of them went, I guess, to Germany, or to what they called, and this is I'll give you a hint. I'm not going to give you a hint. I'll just tell you. In many of the tshuvot in the 13th century, they call a country Eretz Canaan. Who do you think they mean by Eretz Canaan?
It's Israel.
Lo.
Anything that is not in the jurisdiction that is comfortable for Jews.
קרובה. Who were considered slaves in around the 11th, 12th, even 13th century? The Slovaks. All ארצות הסלובקיות, like even Hungary, Poland, all of those places, they will, why they called Slovakian from the word slaves? I know it sounds very not politically correct, and I know I'm recorded, sorry, but that's history, okay? They will bring slaves from there, and they will try to spread Christianity there. So they will call in Chuvot, that you have responsa from the 11th, 12th, 13th century, it's called Eretz Knaan. Now, I'll give you another question. You will be, maybe we should not have any Mare Mekomot. We just, when it says Eretz Ai, the island, it means what?
Greece.
England. Nachon meod, England. Because it's a little island. Okay? So that's called Eretz Ai. So when you read Shuvot from the 11th, 12th century, we need to obviously know a little bit about the language. The language might be a little bit different. So Eretz Knaan is not our Eretz Knaan. It's the Slovaks. And Eretz Ai, it's England.
Is it sometimes mixed up?
What do you
Canaan for Canaan?
Never. Eretz Knaan, it's not anymore about Eretz Israel. Yeah. By the way, even at the time in Bavel, Eretz Israel received another name. B'ma'arava. What is Ma'arava? West, Ma'arav. Because when you sit in Bavel, Eretz Israel is to your west, so it's becoming a Ma'arava. Okay. I think I'm done with Badei HaTosfot. I think so. Yes.
I'm the one who acts low to 10 minutes short.
Why do you bring me there? Yes.
Because when you brought up the topic,
Yeah.
I said, oh, good, I can ask a question. Is there an issue? Is it a problem?
He's taking a Jewish group or what?
Jewish group,
Well, you
not
can.
necessarily religious. He is religious.
Yeah, but it depends. I mean, what kind of church? When do you go to the church?
It's the old city going to...
No. I'm saying is that even it's not for a tour guide, even for a Jew. Can a Jew enter a church? So it's a question.
He's not entering, but he's taking them, and they're not people that are knowledgeable. They're just as part of the tour.
Yeah, but I'm saying it depends. If that's an active church, it's not an active church. If it's an active church, is there is a mass at the same time or not? And you have differences of opinion. Some people say al tikrav, and some people say if there is art there, and it's not at the time of a mass, and it doesn't look like you are worshipping it, so you can go. But it depends. It depends on the poskim. I'm not giving a psak now.
He's taking them.
They can go by themselves. This is the same thing. Yes.
Even if he's on the wall?
What do you mean on the? If there is a tzelem, like if there is his stature. Yeah. It depends. Dispute among the rabbis. I'm not going to tell you my psak. I'm not here to give a psak now. But to give a halachic decision, there is a dispute among the poskim. Yes.
They also had voting, and that was where you had to go and vote in a church. It wasn't in the sanctuary.
It was like in a side. Yeah. So you have many questions. Okay. So let me go to Tosfot, the real Tosfot on the Vav. Okay. Oh wow. Okay. So.
An introduction.
Yeah. Next week.
There's no class next week.
There's no class next week. נכון, יום העצמאות. ונראה דהו הדין בכל שאר איסורים, אלא לאחי נקת כוס יין נזיר, משום דמסתם הנמי שתקבע לה, כיוון, I will translate, don't worry, כיוון דכולי עלמא חם רשת ובשם השכח נזירותו, אבל ישראל שאומר הושט לי נבלה או חזיר או שום איסור, אין לחושדו מלהושיט לו, אבל אם ידוע לו שרוצה לאכלו, אסור להושיט לו. Okay, so Tosfot basically is trying to make a distinction between two different cases. He says the following. He says, the Braita says, מניין שלא יושיט לנזיר. Meaning you shouldn't give a glass of wine to someone who's already, you see that the guy is a Nazir. But if a Jew comes to you and say to you, can you please, I would like to buy the treif meat. Can you give it to him? What's the question here? It's not only about Lifnei Iver lo titen michshol. It's about what is your basic assumption on that Jew. Right? Maybe this Jew just buy this treif because he works for a non-Jew and he's just what? The world guy. Okay? He's just a world guy. Now, maybe he works for a non-Jew. Maybe he works for another Jew. You don't know, right? But why would you assume that what? That he will be the one to eat it. Therefore, Tosfot says, only if you have enough of a reason to suspect that this guy is going to really eat it, so then you are not allowed to sell it to him. So obviously, when it comes to waitresses, for example, okay, can you work in a non-kosher restaurant? Many teens, especially in America, can I work in a non-kosher restaurant? So a Jew comes in. What do?
Yeah, but there are issues of benefit also, not just eating. No?
What?
Kosher, non-kosher, there's more issues.
If I a waiter in a non-kosher restaurant owned by a non-Jew? No. So the question is, can I serve him? So one of the solutions, I'm not saying if I agree with it or not, but the solution is that you can walk there, but you shouldn't serve him.
That's pretty hard.
No, you can just serve someone else's table. Just say, look, I don't serve Jews. As a Jew, I don't serve Jews. Okay, so you can somehow, create.
It's just a very basic question. How can you tell if the person's Jewish?
Yeah, how can you differentiate from that with other?
Now, if I want to be funny, I will tell you that before he eats the tray, he goes and washes his hands. Okay? Or take his kippah from the pocket. But if I don't want to be funny, I'm sure that there is a way to tell if someone is Jewish or not. And if not. If you don't know he's Jewish, so you can treat him the same way you treat everyone else. I will just say one more thing with the workers, because this is something very common. You have non-religious workers who comes to your house, and after a while you want to give them food. So there are two ways to do it. A, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and many others talks about the idea that if you don't give him, he's going to look at you and says, this guy with his kippah, I worked for 3 hours in the garden. The guy did not even offer me a glass of water. What kind of a religion is that? So obviously there is a chilul Hashem in it. So there are two ways you can do it. There are 3 ways even you can do it. You can give him a glass of water and you can drink with him and you say the bracha. Most of the people will say Amen. That's one thing. Second thing is that you can just say, look, there is water in the fridge, or there is a water on the counter, there is food here. Help yourself. Or just feel comfortable. Okay? So if he does it, he does it. He not necessarily wants to eat. Some of them just come with their own water bottle and they come with their own food. They don't want to eat. And there is a third thing, just do it by yourself. But fix your own things. Don't call a handyman. But the idea is that for that question, there is the other side, which is if you don't give him, it can create chilul Hashem. And when there is chilul Hashem, obviously there is a problem. By the way, in the army, if you have children, grandchildren in the army, when they share a room with non-religious friends, whenever you open up food, you share with everyone. There is nothing that it's only yours. Okay? So obviously they all take, and the question comes up without being walking at your house. They all live together. So the same things. You want to create a Kiddush Hashem. So what do? You just say the bracha out loud. Most of the people will probably say Amen, and they're not going to see it as a forced bracha on them. And you will be surprised that many of them will put their hand on the head, and say Amen. So that was like a קצה המזלג, לפני עיוור לא תיתן מכשול. Hopefully by next time we will have sore sheets.